The state of South Carolina's job market may have affected voters' decisions on Saturday. I mean early on, because sometimes we go a little bit.
Sometimes we do them at 9:15.
Well, there's that. But you take a look at South Carolina voters on a number of levels. Yes,
okay, here we go.
Yes.
There we go. So we talked a lot about how Trump won pretty much across the board. He actually, I think, did lose among postgraduates, but leave that aside. But let's look at a couple groups where Trump did particularly well. Those with a high school education or less, where Trump got 45% of the vote, well above his 32% or so average, and Rubio did particularly badly. And let's look at people with lower incomes, below $50,000, where he did a bit better than his overall average. And again, Rubio did particularly badly. And so you get to the question of what's going on in South Carolina, rather, with their economy and with jobs. And so if you take a look at what's happened in South Carolina to manufacturing jobs, and this chart goes all the way back to the year 2000, but what you can see starting kind of at zero as a baseline, you can see that the country as a whole has lost 29% of its manufacturing jobs. And that's after this so-called manufacturing renaissance that really obviously wasn't much of one that you can see here. And you can see that South Carolina lost 31% of its manufacturing jobs. And so if you're in a situation where you don't have a high school diploma and where you're earning less than $50,000 a year and 30% of your manufacturing jobs disappear, you're in a state with lower median income, you're in a state with higher unemployment, it's not totally shocking that someone who is talking about trade, closing the borders, dealing with these jobs, would resonate. If you look
and by the way, somebody brought this up last week, that blue-collar evangelicals were more likely to go for Trump than they were for Cruz, and this is a great example of where. And then the person said, and who will be voting among the evangelicals in South Carolina? Blue-collar evangelicals, big advantage for Trump. This is a good example of actually where you are economically even trumps where you go to church on Sunday, and the blue-collar evangelicals flooded toward Donald Trump.
And if you want to see why Trump's trade position has so much resonance, just take a look at what's happened nationally to manufacturing in certain categories. Textile and apparels, which used to be South Carolina's single biggest industry, 70% of the jobs are gone. If you look at furniture, which is more in North Carolina, the neighboring state, 40% of the jobs are gone, and so on. Only in places like food are we kind of holding our own for obvious reasons. You don't move food around the world so easily. And so, again, Trump's anti-trade, 35% tariffs, appeal to lower income, less educated workers has a lot of resonance.
Is that changing in South Carolina, Steve, at all? When you fly into Charleston, I'm sure you guys saw it. Boeing has a massive construction project underway. You hear about BMW, but maybe not enough to make up for these losses.
Exactly. So this is one of the great myths, that they've got all these new aerospace jobs, they've got all these new foreign car companies, and they do, but they're not nearly enough to overcome the loss of the manufacturing jobs. And by the way, the person who has that blue-collar education just has high school, he's not going to be putting jet engines together in South Carolina. He's going to be unemployed in all likelihood and voting for Trump.
And as they say also in Greenville on a Friday and Saturday night, you're more likely to hear German spoken on the streets of Greenville. That it's crazy. A lot of people actually coming into the United States and working at some of these higher tech jobs.